Where's our video? What's it starting the video? Hey everyone, happy Friday. It's not Thursday because I went out.
You did.
So we've moved to Friday this week, and it is the last webinar before the Unstuck and Unstoppable retreat, which starts next Tuesday here on the Gold Coast, and we're super excited. If you see us looking backwards and forwards, we won't. We'll stick with our Zoom meeting, but I'm trying Facebook Live at the same time, so we'll see what happens. But anyway, welcome. And it's Friday at 6:30. I know you guys would probably rather be down the pub or at the movies watching Avengers or something like that. But
not
hey,
these legends.
No, we're in the right place at the right time. And as our topic said, we're all addicts. And surely not. How can we all be addicts? But really, it is a bit of a state of affairs, isn't it, Craig?
Yeah, so what we want to do is that'll probably come as news to a lot of people. I'm not an addict, I don't smoke, I don't drink and all this sort of thing, but we're going to explore how it is that we are all addicts in different ways, and try and kind of expose some of those ways to bring greater awareness to you, so that you know, with awareness comes choice. If you're unaware of stuff happening, then you're unaware, you know, that you might be able to have other options.
Yeah, absolutely. When we're running around unconscious about anything, it really makes it difficult to choose something different. So, so bringing awareness to it, and then choosing to do something different is important, because a lot of us often say, oh, look, I drink a little bit too much, or I know I'm a sugar addict, or there's something I you know, and then sometimes we wear it as a badge. It's not something that we necessarily then want to go and get rid of. So really important that when we have that awareness, if it's something that's not serving us, we need to find a way to move it on. So tonight we'll be covering a whole heap of different things as to how we get addicted in the first place, and even that it's not even necessarily in the end a neurological thing, but it's actually coming from the whole body. So we'll also be talking about just a couple of ways where we can break out of that using that awareness and move more energy into consciously creating. So strap yourself in, we're ready for it. Here comes our theme music. Oh, we don't have theme music yet. Oh, damn it. We'll work on that for next time. Well, maybe not next time, because we've got retreat, so who knows. Okay, so how do we get addicted? Well, let's imagine young Craig here is a little guy, and maybe something good happens, or he's had a little bit of a traumatic experience. Either way, it doesn't matter, as long as it's heightened emotional state. Maybe he trots down and gets himself that bag of salt and vinegar chips down at the local milk bar or local shop, whatever, and ends up with his little packet of salt and vinegar chips, and he starts to eat them, and he starts to feel that in that heightened emotional state, he's actually resolving some of that tension that is created. So whether it's, we label it a good emotion or a bad emotion, it still gives us a sense of tension in the body. So here he is eating his salt and vinegar chips, and he gets a bit of a release of dopamine or some other lovely endorphin that makes him feel happier, or makes that balance of the stress come down a little bit, and it works. And so next time he has another little situation come up, it's like, oh, okay, cool, I'll try the salt and vinegar chip thing again. And of course, seems to work, gets another dopamine release. And so it doesn't take too many attempts actually for our bodies to actually go, oh, this happens, I feel a little stressed, and I can resolve it by doing X, Y, Z. So I'll go the salt and vinnies, or for some of us it's the alcohol or the chocolate, or having a fight with someone, which sounds really weird, but bear with me, this will come around eventually. And then so initially it just becomes, it is a neurological thing, because the more often you do it, the more you create a rut in your brain and your neurology. The more that you fire the same neurons, the more they actually activate, and they start to drive some of the behavior. But after time, it actually embeds in the cells. So when your brain releases a certain amount of chemicals in a certain combination, so imagine he's eating his salt and vinegar chips, and he gets X amount of dopamine, Y amount of serotonin, and Z amount of oxytocin. So 3 really strong hormones in the brain. And the cells get a flood of that, and they go, oh, that feels so nice, I really love it. And then after a few weeks, he hasn't had his salt and vinegar chips, and then the cells go, hang on, where's my X amount of dopamine and my Y amount of serotonin and my Z amount of oxytocin? I haven't had any for a while, I need a hit. So the cells actually release a signal back into the neurology, signaling to the brain, I need salt and vinegar chips. So there's been no emotional stress necessarily, and all of a sudden, Craig's down the shop with a bag of salt and vinnies under his arm.
Interesting. So no external trigger this time, as there was in the beginning. Now the trigger is coming from the cells and what they're desiring. So they're sending that signal, which is really fascinating.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and it can happen in other ways as well, obviously, because even our gut bugs play a big role. If you have a certain flora in your large intestine, they can get used to certain foods as well. So particularly, let's say, for example, candida. We've all got some candida in our bowels. Some of us are overrun with it. Others of us have it well and truly under control. So it's beneficial. Once it overruns, it creates a bit of a problem. But if your candida levels are quite high and you haven't had the food sources that they really love, which tends to be the carbs, the breads, wheat and sugar and grains and those sorts of things, if they haven't had it for a while, they actually take over your nervous system as well, which sounds crazy because they're not even new, but they actually can create neurological change and change your behavior. So you could be sitting on the couch one minute and next minute you find yourself in the car just about to pull up at the milk bar and get yourself a bag of salt and vinegar chips.
And would you say also that they can set up things for you so that you and make it such that you'll create an external circumstance that will give you the stimulus, like the stress?
Yeah, absolutely. So now we're really turning it around. We're starting to play in the realms of how we create situations around us, and we're often running around going, no, I was a victim, it wasn't me, I didn't make that guy bump into my car, or I didn't make that person have an argument with me. But there is a bit of a thing going on with all that. And of course, we won't go into it too much because, again, it's one of the things that we'll cover on another thing, just creating circumstance and victimhood. But that definitely can happen. And then we've got an excuse to go and get the packet of salt and vinnies or the bottle of beer or the cigarette or whatever. And of course, we can also throw in the basket the hard drugs as well. There's some things that we could try, such as the cocaine, the heroin, all that sort of thing. They don't take very long before you've actually created an addiction cycle in the body. Again, it's a neurological fulfillment, it's a cellular fulfillment, there's a whole heap of stuff going on there, and there's a lot of science around that, so we won't go into that. But it's just become very aware that addiction is part of the human psyche. It's something that we have built into us. And having said that, then there has to be a reason why. There's got to be a benefit. There's got to be a payoff as to why we would get addicted. So one of the things is it's not really there to satisfy our emotion and get rid of our stress. It's actually there because our brains need to be efficient when it's making decisions day in, day out. So it needs to have a quick way of solving problems rather than analyzing every single thing as it comes up. So if the brain has worked out a couple of times that you're having a bit of a bad day and that the stress levels have elevated, but you can bring them down quickly by eating a packet of salt and vinegar chips, the brain goes, perfect, I can help to lower the cortisol, the adrenaline, and all the damaging stress hormones in my body in a really quick way. The quickest way I know is this pattern of having a packet of salt and vinegar chips, right? Or you can substitute whatever other addiction you want to put in there. We're going to give you a few examples of those in a moment. So just bear in mind that that's going on at that level as well. So we just lost our live, but that's okay. We'll just let it do its thing. Yeah, so what was I saying just then?
So just bearing in mind that that's what takes place. So that's the mechanics behind it, which is, it's not necessarily just the way you'd think it'd be. It goes a little bit deeper. It goes from one structure, swings over to another structure.
And because we're trying to make it easy on ourselves to make a quick decision. How do I resolve this? And it's not necessarily helpful. We call addiction because it has a negative connotation to it. It's almost like, oh, I don't want to have one of those, or I want to get rid of that, or whatever. But the important thing to remember is that we also have positive addictions, and we call them habits. We give them a different label. So people who are addicted, say, to exercise or to, my brother-in-law is going for a run the next couple of days in Lombok, 100 kilometers. I'd have to say he's addicted to running up massive hills and down hills and crazy places and all that sort of stuff, because he's an ultra marathon crazy man with dreadlocks and wears a kilt while he's doing it. So it's pretty amazing. So we look forward to seeing what his journey unfolds in the next couple of weeks. But so those addictions, we then label them as a habit because it's a healthy thing. So we can actually use these addictive processes to create good outcomes in our life as well. So, and then we've got to make sure we don't overdo it, because we could always, those habits could become overdone. We could injure ourselves, or we could just be driving our family nuts, or some other area of our life suffers. So it's important that everything's in balance, that we're making conscious choices about things in life. So yeah, really important with that. Also, don't forget different types of emotions. We can some people get addicted to having arguments with their spouse. It's just the way it is. This is the to and fro in that particular relationship. Other people are addicted to adrenaline sports and that sort of thing. Like, you had some good examples today.
Oh, well, base jumping, not bagging out. Base jumping is good stuff. But
yeah, that just makes my palms really sweaty to think of going base jumping.
Oh, high diving, you name it, cliff diving, these sorts of things, And the thing is that there's nothing wrong with these activities necessarily. It's just that if you bring consciousness or awareness into play, then you can make assessments on the activities that you undertake in your life, and more consciously. Some things you might think, look, I love danger, always have, and you don't have any more understanding around it than that. But you may be able, what you love might be actually something a little different to that. And in finding out what that is, you may want to undertake something that's a little less
risky,
and still get the same effect.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, by the way, adrenaline junkies, they're usually the ones running late too.
Interesting.
So because if they're running late, then they've always got a reason to have adrenaline high in the system. So, if you get someone who's constantly running late, check them out. Ask them, what are you, adrenaline junkie? Probably maybe not ask them that, but it's potentially, that's what you're going for. If you're a late person, potentially going for the adrenaline ride.
It is. And what's interesting about the late person is that you'll notice that they always have to carry an excuse as to why they were late. And often it's because they were a victim to dense traffic or, X, Y, Z, and usually puts them in a position where they make excuses. They don't take responsibility. They give away their power. So you can see quickly how a person who's chronically late or in that state of needing the chronic adrenaline rush, and that's the way they obtain it, they put themselves potentially into quite a powerless situation in their life, which then flows over into other areas of their life and affects those other areas negatively.
For sure. So, so those people that are running late, and that excuse thing, if we've got excuses, that's just a way of resolving tension, which is another topic we want to go into at some point too. So as I said, being late, fighting with your spouse can be an addiction. Being right, like there are people on this planet who would prefer to be right than actually eat or drink. They'd rather starve to death and be right. So there's that addiction. Obviously things like sex and TV and junk magazines, gossip, things that just give you a little bit of a release of something. Even running out of money. That sounds like a really weird thing. But again, it's something that people get addicted to. That's like, I'm out of money again, and whether it's because they have to go and ask someone and therefore make a connection, or they get to, feel that sort of, again, a sort of type of sustained adrenaline or whatever, or they've got a problem to solve. So it does become an addiction as well. So yeah, a lot of ways we can become addicted. Another thing to consider is something that they call the crazy eight. So the crazy eight is also a behavioral pattern. So the addiction is actually sort of two-sided. So imagine an eight, like an infinity sign turned over. And so what happens is we have one emotion and an opposing emotion that sets us into a crazy eight pattern. So let's say the example is someone who has anger as one part of their go-to strategies, and the other person, and the other end of the spectrum they have is depression. So then they're addicted to both of them, and it's quite hard, not impossible, but it's quite hard to do both at the same time, because physiologically anger has a different response in the body to what depression does. Even if someone's angry, their posture is different, their facial expression is different, their breathing rate's different, all to the depression side of things. So there's a different patterning going on, that if it's possible to be addicted to both. So what these people tend to do is they'll go through a phase where they're really super depressed, And then the body just gets sick of that. It just doesn't want to be in that state any longer. And so they'll create some drama, or they'll go and pick a fight with somebody. I don't even necessarily mean a physical fight, but an emotional fight. And that will bring up their anger. And they get to run the anger cycle, and they get to push that through nice and strong, and then they get sick of it. They run out of energy. They've sort of fulfilled that part of the addiction, and then they cross over back to the other side, and now they're back to being depressed again. So they're just constantly in this crazy 8 cycle, and it's purely an addiction cycle of how they're going through their life, you know. And you may even know some people who do that, and that's just because of what we're dealing with here. Those cells are craving those certain cocktails of chemicals over and over and over again. And then you think, well, they must be crazy, or they must be manic depressive, or they must be having some issues. It's not necessarily to that extent. They just need to have some awareness around what's going on.
Exactly, because the point for them is that their experience is that stuff is happening to them. And for some people with no awareness around it at all, they don't even recognize the cyclic nature of this pattern that continually happens. They just think that life generally sucks, or they don't even think that far. They just think this is life. This is who
I am.
This is who I am.
This is who I am. It's just going to be that way, blah, blah, blah.
So imagine the difference, though, between being in that chronic state and bringing some awareness in there and starting to acknowledge that, whoa, this is what's happening, and then starting to just incrementally create change in your life, where you might bring in some other more healthy habits.
Yeah, absolutely.
That start to kind of crowd out the old addictions. So, you know, there's nothing radical, just sort of sliding in some stuff because of the awareness that you've got. These sorts of things can make really big differences in the outcomes that you get in life.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, just between now and our next webinar, which will be in a couple of weeks' time, obviously, might be worth just noting down the sorts of things that you believe or perceive that you're addicted to. Maybe it's a behavior. Maybe it's a food or alcohol, or and even the heart stuff, and just becoming aware of that. And then also, this is a really interesting concept too, is to just examine, is that part of my true nature and purpose? Because, you know, we've heard of people who are alcoholic, and, you know, obviously we all want everybody to not be alcoholic. That's our sort of, don't be alcoholic, that's not good for you sort of thing. But we've heard of people who have then said, well, actually that is my true nature and purpose. And so they choose to stick to the addiction. I guess that's totally their choice if they feel that's in alignment with who they are. But that awareness, obviously at least gives them the choice to make the choice, rather than just be unconsciously alcoholic. Obviously we would try and convince them it's not good for your liver. You're not only going to suffer, but you'll be a burden to everybody else. But anyway, at this point in time, those people obviously have their reasons for doing that sort of thing.
Yeah, and the crux of it is choice, like you say.
Absolutely.
You know, you get around in life and you think that you've got choice, but if there's so much underlying stuff that's kind of dictating how it is you live life, that's kind of cancelling out largely the choice that you really do have. Let's bring some more awareness in and get some more choice going on.
Absolutely, because it's really funny. People have this perception that life is about being happy, and life is about love, and life is about being in a peaceful state and all this sort of stuff. But actually, we have a massive spectrum of emotions that we can and will experience throughout life. And actually, the way to happiness as far as emotions go, it's not choosing one and sticking to that. I want to do that for the rest of my life, because you can't, for one, and for two, it is not going to make you happy. It's being able to experience a choice, the range of emotions. You know, sometimes you actually need and want to feel angry. Sometimes you want and you need to feel grief. Sometimes you want and you need to feel a sense of melancholy or downtime. And there's nothing wrong with that. What is wrong is really if we get stuck in one of them or addicted to one of them, or several of them. So it's important that we're able to come back to that state of choice in any way, shape or form that we can. And of course, the key to all of that is being aware. You know, what's my go-to, and is this appropriate to feel? So yeah, it's something. We don't want to eliminate the spectrum of emotions. We're human. We're here to experience all of it. So it's important that we just allow that choice to be made as we move through life. And actually, that's how you get happy, for want of a better word.
Yeah.
It's not really a happiness, is it? It's something else. But anyway, we'll come up with the right word for that eventually.
That's the midpoint, isn't it?
It is. It's the midpoint, and that's another amazing webinar that we'll be doing soon too.
Yeah.
So, and to the people coming along to the retreat next week on Tuesday, you guys are going to get like all of that and the webinars we've done so far on steroids. It's going to be massive. This time next week, we will actually have finished. Yes, we will. We'll be finished. We'll have a celebration lunch, and we'll be into our 30-day follow-up program. And you guys are in for an absolute treat, mind-blowing webinar. We can't. It's not a webinar. We're all going to be in person. So retreat. It's going to be amazing. We can't wait. We won't specifically be talking about addiction, but it may come or out of the material that we've got to cover. And so we're looking forward to being there next week and seeing you guys on the webinar the week afterwards, probably the Thursday, unless I go painting again.
Why not? Looked pretty good. I might head over myself.
Yeah, it was darn fun, I have to say. So, and that's all about learning to express your heart and being true to yourself. So that is amazing too.
Quickly, just because we've got a moment, expressing your heart. I noticed that you said something about that. One of the main things you said when you came home about your experience that you noticed that was really obvious was, do you remember what it was?
No, you put me on the spot, so no.
Sorry, I've forgotten too. So half the story. Sorry, guys. No, I'm kidding.
Linda said, make a lawyer. Lawyers never ask a question unless you know the answer.
That's good. No, what Linda said was, I can't believe they've ripped the time office there somewhere.
Oh, yes.
Remember that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, because it went from 6:30 to 8:30. And we got there and Aaron, my son, and I, we were sitting there and we were doing our thing. And then it was like, okay, it's time to go now. Let's pack up. I'm like, we just got here. And I looked at my phone and I went, oh my God, like that felt like 10 minutes. It was 2 hours. And, obviously we got a few things done in the time, but
such a good example.
Amazing. Just being in the flow, like just perfectly in the flow. And loved it, every minute of it. So when they have another one, I'll be back. So fantastic. So if you've got any questions, pop them in the comments, and we look forward to seeing the webinar attendees week after next, and the retreat guys. Can't wait to see you on Tuesday.
Can't wait, guys.
Yay. All right, have a good night. Enjoy your Friday. Thanks for joining us, and enjoy the weekend. Bye.
See ya.